The US is hosting its midterm elections on November 8th, and pundits say the results hold major implications for the remaining 2 years of the Biden administration and look to shape the 2024 presidential race. So what exactly are the US midterm elections? What issues are affecting voter sentiment? And how are they looking to play out? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Indeed, today we touch upon the US midterm elections, which are scheduled for the 8th of November local time. I have Sukhee Kang, former mayor of Irvine and current chair of Korean Americans for Political Action, live on the line. Mr. Kang, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here today.
Right. I also have Steve Herman, chief national correspondent at the Voice of America, live on the line as well. Steve, it's good to have you on.
Good morning.
Right, Steve, let's start with you then. Let's begin with a few words on the US midterm elections for those who may not be familiar with it. Essentially, what are they and why do they matter?
Well, they're called midterms because they're in the middle of the presidential term, the four-year term. So we're 2 years after the presidential election. Every seat in the House of Representatives, the lower house, is up for election, 435 seats. And then 1/3, approximately 34 seats of the Senate, of the 100 Senate seats, will be up. And it's extremely consequential because in these midterm elections, especially when we have had a new president, the party in power usually does not do well. As Barack Obama called it the first time it happened to his party, the Democrats, he called it a shellacking. So the Democrats tomorrow, or today actually now, are hoping not to have a shellacking.
Right, I see. And against that backdrop, Mr. Kang, what can you tell us about the general public atmosphere surrounding the midterm elections there?
Well, as Steve mentioned, this midterm election could have wide-ranging effects on the prospect of the 2024 presidential election, as could hot-button issues like economy, inflation, abortion rights, climate change, and health care. So I see the recent surging of people voting by mail-in vote, early voting, and voting tomorrow at the poll. As Steve mentioned, historically speaking, from 1862 to 2018 elections, out of 40 midterm elections, ruling party lost 36 elections. However, the stake of this 22 midterm election is very high for the American people. In many of the recent national poll shows, there are quite a few key races that are very tight and unpredictable as we go into the election tomorrow. So I anticipate the voting record is very high in that previous midterm election cycle. But the bottom line is the voter turnout. How many people will actually come out to vote tomorrow? Both Democrats and Republicans will decide the election result, who will take the majority in the Senate and the House. I suspect it'll take several weeks until the final results come out.
Right, I see.
Yeah, one thing we do know is that more than 40 million people have already cast ballots in early voting. So those are some pretty robust numbers.
Right, I see. And Steve, stay with what Mr. Kang has just said. What more can you tell us about the major issues of interest among voters there?
Well, in both parties, we do know that voters are very concerned about the economy, specifically inflation and higher grocery prices, higher gas prices. All of this has contributed to a plunging approval rating for the incumbent president, Joe Biden. And that's another reason that Democrats are very concerned they could get hit pretty badly. Now, we also had earlier this year the Supreme Court decision basically turning over the issue of abortion to the states, saying it's not a federal matter. That caused a lot of outrage among what are called the pro-choice voters, who are predominantly Democrats in this country. But there's some question as to whether that may have happened now too far ago, and a lot of the passion has gone away from that. But we'll have to see what the numbers look like for the turnout, and also from the exit polling that'll be done during the day to see what is really driving people to go to the polls.
Right. Mr. Kang, what do you suppose is the focus of interest for Korean American voters there in the States?
Well, there are basically two major reasons. Number one, obviously the economy has consistently been the top issues for Korean American community. As you know, Korean American small business owners have been hit very heavily since the pandemic began 3 years ago. So with high inflation, high interest rate, cost of living increase, and high energy costs, many Korean Americans are concerned what comes next. They want to make sure that all these items be stabilized as soon as possible. And traditionally, voter turnout by the Korean American community have been very low. However, with all these critical issues at hand, the Korean American voters actually have decided to come out to vote in a much larger scale. Another critical factor has been an increasing anti-Asian hate crime throughout the United States. New research finds that hate crimes targeting the Asian American community have reached some unprecedented levels. For example, Asian Americans make up about 15% of the California population, and Asian Americans have been a target of xenophobia, hate crimes, leading into in recent years. So the hate crime data reveal that anti-Asian hate crime increased by almost 400% last year compared to the year before, with New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and other big cities surpassing their record number in 2020. Asian American communities are very concerned about this trend. This is another reason why Korean Americans will come out heavily to vote in this election tomorrow.
Right, hopefully that will be the case. Steve, how are pundits there meanwhile projecting the midterm elections to play out?
Well, most of the forecasts are for the Democrats to lose control of the House of Representatives. The Senate is another story. There are hopes. President Biden on Monday evening said he was hopeful, confident that the Democrats would hold on to the Senate, but he wasn't willing to say that about the House. Earlier in this program, there was a report noting the key states, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Georgia, where it's really too close to call, and one or two of those races is really going to decide whether the Democrats do retain control of the Senate.
Right, I see. And against that backdrop, Mr. Kang, what are your prospects with regard to the potential performance of Korean American candidates in the midterm elections?
It's a great question. In the 2022 election cycle, we have more than 50 candidates running for various offices in the U.S. And we have 4 members of Congress who are running for re-election. Andy Kim from New Jersey, Marilyn Strickland from the state of Washington, Young Kim and Michelle Park Steele from California. Korean American communities are looking forward to seeing all 4 members of Congress be re-elected tomorrow. And also David Kim is another candidate in California, a 34th congressional district. He fought a great fight against an incumbent 2 years ago, and this is his return match, and hope to see him win this election. Another great news is that Hawaii's Representative Sylvia Chan-Luke will be elected as Lieutenant Governor of Hawaii on election night, and she will be the highest-ranking Korean American to be elected in the country. So there will be a first woman elected to the New York State Assembly, Grace Lee, and Representative Sam Park from Georgia will be elected to his 4th term, along with Cindy Ryu from the Washington state. So the political future of Korean American community looks brighter than ever. And ultimately, we're looking forward to a day when a Korean American could become the president of the United States of America. And I say amen to this.
Right, I see. More broadly speaking, Stephen, how would a Republican success in the midterm elections affect the Biden administration's future plans? And likewise, do you suppose a Democrat success would serve to perhaps add more momentum into the administration's remaining agenda?
Well, certainly if the Democrats can hold on to both the House and the Senate, then it doesn't mean effectively that Joe Biden is really totally focused on his election campaign if he decides to run again, because they won't be able to get much done legislative-wise. It could be quite dire for the Democrats if the Republicans take control of the legislative branch. We'll almost certainly see if the Republicans control the House, impeachment against the president, perhaps some of his cabinet officials as well. We could see all sorts of investigations, sort of turning the tables on what was done with the January 6th committee going after former President Trump. And really, we're going to see a very, very tough time for the Democrats because everything that the Republicans will be doing to a great degree in the House and in the Senate will be with one eye on 2024, on the presidential election, whoever their presidential candidate happens to be. And Donald Trump on Monday evening said he's going to make a very big announcement on November 15th at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. And almost everybody thinks that he's going to announce that he's going to run. And he is the front runner in the polls right now for the Republicans.
Right, I see. Mr. Kang, what look to be the broader implications of the results of this election on Washington's ties with its counterparts, including, of course, Seoul?
Well, regardless of the outcome of the midterm election, I don't anticipate there will be any policy changes towards the Korean Peninsula and the U.S.-Korea alliances. This assurance actually comes from the bipartisan consensus of maintaining the ironclad relationship between the U.S. and the Republic of Korea from both the Republican and Democratic parties. President Biden's policy on the Korean Peninsula issues approaches within the regional policy framework since there has been no progress dealing with North Korea. So I suspect the status quo will continue for the time being. However, the level of recent provocation from North Korea has heightened the concerns, and even stronger defense alliance will be the key between the U.S. and Korea. Also at the same time, with continuing the comprehensive strategic alliance, I hope there are even stronger efforts collaborating on development of semiconductors, high-powered batteries, and vaccine supplies between the two countries. And I must say that U.S.-Korea alliance is stronger than ever.
Right, indeed. And Steve, before you leave us, just one final question. It's an impromptu question, but do you see the results of the midterm elections perhaps as greatly shaping the future of the 2024 presidential race?
I think that's very difficult to say at this point because we have a couple of very big unanswered questions. One is, will Joseph Biden run again? And if he does not, then it's really an open field with the Democrats. And on the Republican side, the big question, of course, is will Donald Trump be able to repeat what he did in 2016? He may have some other famous names running against him, perhaps his former Vice President Mike Pence, perhaps Mike Pompeo, who was Secretary of State. They may run even if Trump does run. And will he be able to mow through the Republican field again? Obviously, if the Republicans control the House and the Senate, it really helps them shape the agenda for the political landscape ahead of the 2024 presidential election.
I see. But at this point, then, lots of questions remain and very few answers at the moment, right, Steve?
Well, the two big question marks are Biden and Trump.
Right, I see. Good point there. All right, Steve, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Mr. Kang, as always, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you so much.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Issues and Insiders. We'll be back same time tomorrow. See you then.